Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Per Aspera Ad Astra is over. It's tickle time!
Слушай, ты человек или кто?
А если нас созданы убивать?
У человека должен быть дом. Но как всякое благо, оно может обернуться во зло. Непостижимо. Ужасно. Кто ты? Сейчас решается судьба всей планеты.
Andy, I was wondering, if I'm a guy, we watch a lot of movies around these parts, and I'm asunder with one sheets and tear sheets, and I don't know how to catalog all of my sticky notes of reviews that I do of the movies that I watch. What should I do? What should I do with these sticky notes, Andy?
Well, Pete, we have an answer for you over at The Next Reel. All you need to do is go to thenextreel.com/letterboxed. That's right, Letterboxd. And you can sign up for a Letterboxd Pro or Patron membership at a discounted price because we love Letterboxd and they love us. And you can jump in there and start entering all those reviews into your own Letterboxd account. And you can track them and you can catalog them and you can read other people's reviews and like their reviews and comment on their reviews, and they can do the same to yours. It's fantastic.
Andy, I'm looking at the page right now, and you know who's right on top staring at me with those cold steel ancient eyes?
Max von Sydow?
Keanu Reeves.
Keanu Reeves, okay.
That's John Wick. He's getting fitted for a suit, and I kind of feel like that's what I'd be getting if I were to sign up for Letterboxd. For the Pro account, you can get it for $15 for 1 year, and if you sign up for a Patron account, you get it for $39 for 1 year. And it even has a little note. If you go to that URL, it says, your Next Reel discount has been applied. You may now purchase or renew if your subscription expires in the next 90 days for this renewed discounted price. It's an incredible deal. We love Letterboxd, and we have all of our films in Letterboxd. So hang out there with us. nextreel.com/letterboxd. Andy, there's a lot of movie in this movie.
Yes, there is.
Per Aspera Ad Astra.
Through the Thorns to the Stars.
That's pretty good, right? Through the Thorns. That's one that I feel like maybe we talked about, maybe we heard. It's a lot of the translations end up with "to the stars by the hard ways," which sounds like a sort of just transliteral of the Latin. But I like "Through the Thorns to the Stars." That's got some poetry to it.
I read a bunch of them at the end of last week's episode that somebody over on Letterboxd that posted in the review all the different variations of the name, because there are quite a few. But I do think through the Thorns to the Stars or Through Adversity to the Stars is another one that I liked. I think
it doesn't have that. It doesn't have that Pushkin, like father of Russian literature kind of yen to it, like it's got poetry. Through the Thorns to the Stars.
But what I didn't realize is this is actually a very popular Latin phrase. Like I'd only heard the Ad Astra part. I mean, apparently I have heard it before because it's a line that has been said in films and stuff like that. It's just something that I apparently miss a little bit, or they say it and I'm not exactly sure what it means. Right. But like in The Martian, the film The Martian that we talked about over in the film board, that is actually on the floor in some lecture hall as a part of the logo.
Right.
It's a very common phrase.
It's the motto for Starfleet, Andy.
Right. You're right. Yes.
If it's not that, it's the Morristown Beard School in Morristown, New Jersey. It's the Kansas State motto. Of course, I'm talking about Ad Astra Per Aspera. They flip-flop it.
It goes either way.
The Wikipedia page is legion of all of the various uses of Ad Astra. And don't forget that hit film with Brad Pitt, Sad Dad Astra, which is yet another variant. I stole that from Tommy. Metz. I love that joke. And so this is a movie that it puts our group of spacefaring humans, Soviets flying through space. They discover a derelict spacecraft, and on it a bunch of dead clones and one that's not. And they rescue her and bring her down. And that is the start of Per Aspera Ad Astra, Through the Thorns to the Stars. How did this movie hit you in our series of Soviet sci-fi films?
It's an interesting one. I'm glad I watched it. I don't think I liked it. I found some interesting elements within the film. The way that it was constructed sometimes just didn't work that well for me. But I enjoyed the overall vibe that the film has.
So you enjoy the vibe. What is it? Can you characterize what it is you don't like about it?
I just don't think the story, it just was kind of a little sloppy in its construction. I didn't feel it was as cohesive as it should have been. It feels very bifurcated in the sections of the film. And
you might even say trifurcated.
Well, it is actually just two parts in the original edit of the film, which is 2.5 hours, where it actually has part one, which is largely the story of Nia on Earth. And part two is kind of going back to her home planet and dealing with that. And it's just, but I feel like I didn't feel as much sense of real reason for the first half of the story, unfortunately. It just feels like, where are we going with this? Why are we in this realm for such a long time before we start exploring the second half of the story? And so I just felt like the script writing was clunky. It's kind of an interesting story. I thought the world was kind of an odd little, weirdly retro 50s sci-fi sort of feel, even though it was just, I think, just low budget Russian because they didn't have the money. So I don't know. I found it to be interesting. I just didn't. It didn't strike me as successful as our last film from last week.
Yeah, I'm right with you, and I was curious how you would characterize where the film sort of falls apart. For me, it is a long sort of degradation of pace and plot and emotion from the beginning to the end. And I really like where it starts. I love that we find this alien clone. I actually really enjoy the stuff at their house. I think it's fun and funny, and I think there's an interesting fish out of water story that they're telling there. And then it unravels into a hyper emotional Interstellar by the end, where like it's just this kind of weird environmental destruction. We're destroying the planet, kind of just movie that's just trying to shake us. But I don't think the technology and the performances and certainly the costume design can live up to the story that they wanted to tell at the end of the movie. And so it just sort of falls apart and becomes kind of ranty. And I don't like it anymore. It's like I just find myself falling out of love with the movie every successive minute. It is super easy to lampoon. There are a lot of fun, funny things that make it a great target for something like Mystery Science Theater 3000, which has actually done a variant of this movie on it. And in that context, this movie's low-hanging fruit, right? There are some things in here that are delightful.
Yeah, they did a version, I think it was called Humanoid Girl, which had been cut down, or Humanoid Woman, it had been cut down by almost an hour. So that leaves it, depending on which cut they took it from, either an hour and a half or an hour length. So it would be a very short version, and it was dubbed in English. So I can imagine with some of the Looney Tunes-esque elements of the story and the way some of the things happen, I can see it being a very easy film to, like you were saying, to lampoon.
Yeah, I think so. And is there any story left at that point?
And which story are they focusing on? Is it the time on Earth, or is it the time going back to Dessa? So
I don't know. It'd be easy to go either way. They have to be on Dessa, man, because then we get tickle time.
You don't want to kind of, the Mystery Science Theater was going to want to talk about tickle time.
They're using tickle time for sure. All right.
Well, before we get to tickle time, what should we talk about? I think it's interesting as an initial element to talk about this being part of our science fiction, Russian or Soviet science fiction series, and the idea that Soviets were using science fiction as a way to kind of get some either social commentary, political commentary, or perhaps getting across some of the communist and Soviet ideologies of the time. What were you getting out of this as far as kind of the feel for that? Did it feel like our filmmakers here, headed by Richard Viktorov, who is directing it, and Kir Bulichov, who wrote the original source material, do you feel like they were kind of more pro-Soviet ideology and were kind of using this to kind of promote that kind of view of the world, or do you feel like they were making more commentary on it?
It's a little bit tricky to talk about because I think there are a number of things around like sort of ideological integration, certainly integration of the outsider. This is another movie that sort of leverages on some of the things we talked about last week, with how do you handle alien beings, alien creatures. This is a movie that sort of celebrates that, right? We have the benevolent scientist who brings this alien clone into his home, and they sort of adopt her and teach her, and she develops a relationship with his son, and they learn about her. It's a movie that focuses not a little bit on the sort of mind control, that sort of authoritarian mind control, and what can we do to free Nia from having this brain controlling device in her head and turning off the signal and freeing her, liberating her to live her authentic life, right? This is all stuff that is reflecting on the authoritarian, the Soviet state, and certainly a critique of it. The fact that they made the villain a capitalist little person is right in the sweet spot of commentary, anti-Soviet commentary, right? That is a sort of anathema to everything that they stood for. So I think he's definitely making some strong critiques by just how he talks about some of these science fiction elements that you with the gift of hindsight we see how the state can be sort of transposed on top of this movie and see where those critiques are. But I could totally see watching this movie in 1981 and maybe just getting kind of lost in it, right? Not actually noticing some of those more stringent critiques. I don't know, what'd you get out of it?
As I was looking at this film, I was like, I couldn't help but feel like my experience with kind of that whole idea of the propaganda of the Soviet ideologies and the commentary of those, I feel like I was not as prepared for, perhaps, with this series as I could have been. Like, as I looked at it and as I was reading, looking at the Wikipedia page about Soviet Union propaganda does give me some sense of what they were saying, why they were saying it. I mean, I know some of the basics and stuff like that, but I mean, there are a lot of elements that they're talking about. And I was like, okay, so what? I definitely think that the kind of the capitalist nature of the villain in our film was one of the elements that likely they were poking at. But also, I think the idea of allowing for kind of this peace-loving view of this keeping the environment healthy and all this stuff was stuff that they were trying to promote, even if they weren't necessarily doing that. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there are some interesting elements within this film that, but I don't think they're very overt. I feel like in the case of this particular film, it's minimal. And what's interesting, and maybe this is a good time to talk about the different edits of this film, because the longer version of this is 2.5 hours, and then the director's son, in 2001, actually restored it. He redid some of the special effects, remixed all the audio, had some of the original actors come back to do some ADR to kind of clean up the lines and everything. But he also cut 25 minutes out of the film. A lot of it was to speed up the story, but also it says to excise some Soviet ideological context. I ended up watching both versions of the film side by side.
Andy.
Well, no, I watched them side by side, and I would run them simultaneously, and then I would see, okay, well, this, and I will say a lot of it was just shortening of scenes. There was a lot of, because there were some scenes where in the shorter version, it shows Naya walking up some stairs, like a long set of stairs, and you just catch her at the very end of it as she's getting to the top. In the long version, like, you watch the entire thing of her walking from the bottom all the way to the top. Like, there's a lot of those little things. But the context that, and I guess this was my issue, is like the actual conversations that they excised. in my head, I'm like, well, I didn't think that was Soviet ideologies. Maybe I just missed it. And so I don't know. I enjoyed the long version. It was fine, but I didn't feel like it like had a whole bunch of overt kind of promotion of anything. So I guess that's something that I read about, and it surprised me that I didn't think that there was that much in it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I am just so peripherally a student of like that era of Soviet ideological, the Soviet ideological state that it's hard to comment on it. There are some things that seem pretty obvious. I think that the mind control chip is the one, and the fact that the entire movie like ends on the separation of these two characters, her free to live the life and help her people, and him going back to wherever he's going. They cannot end happily, right? They don't end up together. It's not a relationship movie. It's a service to the people movie.
Yeah,
so
right.
I think there's certainly something to the conflict that exists between recognizing that there might be something to this whole communist notion and the authoritarianism of the Soviet state that the filmmakers sort of exist between, right? You can feel they're sort of pulled between these two things that makes it a challenge to make art about it, a challenge to think about it, talk about it, and move forward through it. I found myself really kind of connecting most with the doctor in the beginning, and his house and his connection to other doctor. I guess, was that his wife or friend or sister or something?
Oh yeah, no, it wasn't his wife.
No,
it was another doctor. Yeah,
another doctor, right?
The one who wanted to do the brain work. You mean?
Yeah, wanted to do the brain work. Like the whole like performative aspect of intelligentsia, right? Of the intellectual state, the science state. That's something that clearly is celebrated by in this film, and but at the same time, they're welcoming in this alien creature, which is something that's generally not celebrated, right? It's the same thing we talked about last week, right? We fear the aliens, and then at the end of the movie, he destroys the greatest discovery of mankind. He destroys it in favor of the conflict that he's dealing with the state. That's kind of where we live. It's like walking this fine line between this movie.
Although, did you feel like Stepan was perhaps a representative of the Soviet ideology because he was trying to, I don't know if this is the right word, but convert her to his way of thinking by kind of teaching her, well, this is the way, like, the way that you do things. I was thinking that maybe that's what they were saying with some of that.
Well, that's kind of what I mean, though, because in the end, it ends sourly. He's trying to convert her to do these things that are good for the people, but then she goes and does it for Dessa, right? Isn't she kind of doing the same thing? Isn't she living the representative, life for her people? Yeah,
but I guess in my head, I was thinking maybe that's just a way to kind of say it's the spread of that ideology, right? Like it's not like they're not staying together. It's like now
it's a proselytizing agent. Right?
Exactly.
Like,
right. Yeah. Now we've made this planet clean, right? We've come in and the little poltergeist lady. This planet is clean.
I was just thinking this planet is clean. Moving on. I can see that. I can see that. So I think that's where the movie is. Maybe if I were a better student of Soviet history, it would be even more interesting to watch, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But even so, I thought it was it's in service of the story that they're trying to tell. I thought it was interesting, even if I'm not going to go back and watch this movie again.
Yeah, there were some interesting elements in the film, and it was told in an interesting way. I wish that the script had been stronger and a little more cohesive from start to finish. Like, there are cohesive elements in the first half, in the second half. I wanted things to tie together more strongly. Like, I didn't even realize by the time they're leaving Earth to go off, like she'd already spent a year of time on Earth. And I'm like, well, what has she learned? Like, I didn't feel like there had been any sense of growth for her by the time all of a sudden she was going to leave.
Well, Andy, she learned Russian. Something.
Yes. All right. She learned Russian, and she learned how to not be so afraid of the grass.
I'm kind of surprised all of the natives of Dessa didn't teach her Russian, because they speak it very well.
Right, exactly. Another quick note that I thought was interesting that apparently was excised in the script. The end title in the credits apparently meant to have said all the scenes of the dying planet Dessa were shot at the territory of the Soviet Union. Now, apparently that had been censored out, and I'm assuming it's because they didn't want to emphasize the fact that, like, as I was saying, they wanted to get across the idea that this was, like, they were pro-nature. They were taking care of the planet, even if they weren't necessarily always doing that. So they cut it out. Now, in the versions that I saw, both of them had at the end, all the scenes of the dying planet Dessa were shot on the Earth, which takes a little bit of the message out. So I don't think they quite got that right still. I would love to have seen it, say, in the Soviet Union as a way to kind of emphasize the fact that, we haven't done that great of a job with all of this.
Well, I get that. I still found it kind of moving, right? I found that the planet Earth bit, since it's a movie about, alien clones from another planet, it's the take care of what you got, folks story. And it's Star Trek Nemesis, man.
It works. It's just in the context of Soviet ideology, that's actually an interesting change that they made.
Yeah, I think so too. But it does get to the institutional fear of, external judgment. Like, you're not going to look at us and think that we've done something foolish. Everything we do will be presented brilliantly.
What I love about this is, like, when I saw that that's how it was, I'm like, oh, this is like Chernobyl. Like, it's that same mentality that they had, covering that whole thing up. Did you ever see that they were making a Chernobyl response to the HBO Chernobyl that we had? No,
and that was the news that came out of the Russian entertainment industry, and apparently the cause of it all was an agent of the CIA. That was going to be the twist. Don't worry, the CIA did it. We're fine.
Yeah. If
it weren't for that pesky CIA.
Oh, geez.
That's kind of what this movie made me think about, right? Like, at what point does each party take responsibility for?
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, like, some of the ideological stuff, especially in the third act, as we're on Dessa, that could have been, in the annals of history will teach us nothing, that could have been written in 1945, and it could have been written in 2020, right? Yeah. The way the people of Dessa do not trust science at their own peril, right? They're poisoning their own water supply for capitalist purposes, and to prove prove in heavy air quotes that the foreigners are coming in to destroy what we've got, all in an effort to help, to cure, to cleanse.
Right. Controlling the media, controlling the word that gets out to the people about how bad these Earth beings are, and that they're really the ones who are coming here to destroy our way of being.
See, here's the thing. I think this movie could have been, and I guess this is to your point about watching the whole two-parter. I think this would have been a more successful movie if it were so much tighter. Had it started with the rescue of the clone and gone straight to their travel to Dessa, like compress the entire bit on the planet, on Earth, and get us to the sort of machinations of capitalism versus, socialism or communism at the end, in the last part of the film. That could have been a nice tight movie, right? It could have been really fun to watch that stuff. Those were some of the mechanics that I thought started to fall apart in comparison to what we had in the beginning, that was assured and confident and clean. And I don't think we need both of those. I think this story of Nia, learning who she is and going back home can be told on the spaceship, traveling to Dessa and actually getting there. I think it's just too much movie.
Yeah, I mean, by the time we're watching the robot cleaning up the watermelon and things like that, I'm like, this is like, what is this journey that I'm on with this movie? It's going down some slow paths that aren't necessarily, I mean, yeah, I get it. We're exploring some of the individualism and stuff, like when Nia's trying on wigs and stuff, but I'm just like, it's not getting me to the story, and it takes so much time. I mean, it was enjoyable. Watching her on Earth was kind of fun, but I'm just like, I don't know where I'm going with this, and that's what was driving me nuts with the film.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been the movie, right? It's her story integrating into, modern 1981 Soviet culture, or whatever, the future Soviet culture. And it could have been kind of the Soviet take on Bicentennial Man. You know what I mean? Like, it could have just been that movie.
Learning the difference between being a robot or being human.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which would have been fine, too.
And that seemed to be what they were doing. And then all of a sudden, it's like I don't know, I guess she goes to this Aztec temple. Is that where they were? I wasn't quite clear. She has like a vision of her, quote, dad, and starts kind of seeing these things that bring her back to more about her people. And then she sees the, the ambassador from Dessa who's here to get help. And that kind of spurs on her stowing away on their ship and the rest of the story. But it I don't know. I guess I was trying to figure out what they were doing, and it just took a while.
Well, and there are some sloppy mechanics too, like around the machine that controls her brain center. Yeah. Like, the way I understand it, and I did not understand this when I watched the movie, but only when I read the Wikipedia summary of the film after, that it was actually the brain control device that had triggered her to teleport onto the Astra without the space suit. That was unclear watching the movie for me. And sometimes
I thought she just really wanted to go, and so busted
so bad,
through, like she busted through the window and just ran right over.
That was it. There are a number of those kinds of things that happen in the movie that are sort of Deus Ex Machina, like it just happens. But clearly, the intention, when going back to source material, was that was specified. And I think some of it is this weird sort of retro science fiction fallback that we get into, where they do all sorts of color changes and quick edits and flashes to other times and things that we're supposed to interpret as this is being done by this machine, but in fact it does not telegraph that way on screen. It doesn't work.
I really appreciate that they were working with the budget they had. It was a little odd to see a 1980 movie that felt like 40s or 50s sci-fi.
Yeah.
Like, it just felt so weirdly dated. Like, the robot was so clearly a person in a costume with like
it's
human.
Amazing.
I was like, wow, what are we doing here? It was so peculiar. But I really did enjoy it, but because at times it felt like it was almost designed for kids, like the way she would, as she ran through glass, which happened several times, it was a cartoon cutout of her body in the glass when she goes through it. And I'm like, what are they doing with this? It was so strange.
That was amazing. And at the same time, it falls back on these like just incredible Soviet ideological stalwarts. This is a movie about class oppression and economic exploitation. And the end of the movie, there is a bad guy, and he's a capitalist, money-grubbing oxygen dealer, and he's gross and also incredibly ticklish. We have to talk about the tickle part.
When I saw this happen, I just was wondering, like, how many times could heroes in other films have defeated the villain if only they had tried tickling? Like, James Bond never has tried tickling any of his villains. Maybe he could have stopped them much earlier in the film. Likewise, maybe the Avengers just needed to tickle Thanos, and that would have stopped him from the snap. Like,
you've got to ask yourself now:
it's entirely
was Hans
possible.
Gruber ticklish?
It was right. Who else?
Darth Vader ticklish? The Emperor ticklish?
There's clearly something missing from from
This
cinema.
is a sequence that happens. It happens quickly. The scientist is there is a confrontation with the capitalist bad guy,
Turinchaks. Yeah,
the Turinchaks.
yeah. It's the ambassador, right? Ambassador
Right.
Rakan
Yes.
is confronting Turinchaks and gives him a tickle.
I told you. I asked you, did you get to the tickle part? And you said no, and that delights me.
You said that, and I was like convinced that it was something that happened earlier in the film that you mistook for tickling, because so many kind of odd relationship or kind of getting together moments happen early in the film while Nia is at Lebedev's house. Right. And so I was like, oh, maybe there was something in there that he mistook for tickling. But no, Rakan, when he's confronting the villain of the film toward the climax, he gives him a tickle. And that's pretty much it until Turinchaks has his goon stab Rakan in the back. And,
but they say it out loud, and that's the part. Oh, you're ticklish. And Turinchaks rolls his head back and gives just this deep, open mouth laugh at how ticklish he is. And this is the climax of the battle between the good guy and the bad guy, and it's a tickle fight. And it's amazing. Like, I cannot underscore how awesome this 15 seconds of film is in this whole movie.
Well, and it's emphasized not. I don't want to. I don't know. I don't want to diminish. I don't
Go
know
ahead,
if I
Andy.
should even say
Diminish.
this.
Whatever.
No, it's just Turinchaks is also a dwarf. He's very short, and you don't realize this until at one point when he decides to confront Rakan. He jumps up from behind his desk onto his desk, and he's still shorter than Rakan. And Rakan kind of takes a step back and looks at him like, "Oh, I had no idea." And so it was that moment that preceded the tickling that it's just like all of that kind of came at one time. And it's like the throwing the dwarf scene in Lord of the Rings. It's like very peculiar.
Well, it is. And it goes back to that. There is, I think, a Soviet, like this fits as part of the Soviet fear of the unknown and the different, and I don't think that 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s Soviet Union was a great place for little people, right? Anybody with any sort of physical difference was misunderstood, and that's kind of what you see in this movie. And when he jumps up on the desk and says, "You haven't seen me before, have you?" Right? He's recognizing that there's this shock, and he's wielding it, he's using it. And you can tell that's kind of part of his power is that he is misunderstood constantly. Right. And that's what I'm sort of sucking out of the heart of this movie as I watch it, because the way it's displayed on film is funny, but I don't think they intended it to be funny. I certainly don't think it was meant as a comic moment in the source material.
I wouldn't think so. I mean, I know Kir Bulyachev, the author of this script, he's a very very popular Soviet Russian sci-fi writer who has done, I think he's had more projects adapted for film, TV, or animation more than any other Russian sci-fi author. And in fact, he's a lot of stuff that he's written has been children. Like, he has this whole children's science fiction series called Alisa Selezneva, which apparently is hugely popular. So I can't help but feel like some of the tone that he would write, I don't think that they specifically intended this to be a science fiction film for children, but I can't help but feel like some of the way that he approached things have that feel to them just by nature. And so it just, when you get to the bad guy and you tickle him, the cartoon cutouts, a lot of these elements just feel something that you would get in a film that's more aimed at children.
Yeah, you definitely do. I was looking for, because this was based on his book, right? He had adapted his own book, I think.
He wrote the script. From what I read, it was actually not a book that he wrote, but it was an original script that he wrote.
Okay.
But
that
it
was
was his
unclear
script
to me.
Yeah, it was unclear to me too, because I kept looking, trying to find it, but everything that
I can't. I find a lot of his stuff in Amazon that you can get. Some of it's, some apparently good translations: Red Star Tales, Collected Works, Earth and Elsewhere, Best of Soviet Science Fiction, Roadside Picnic. Oh, that's a Strugatsky bit. But anyway, there are some good compilations with some of his material in there. I haven't read any of his stuff, so it's hard to say. But I would love to. This is one of those stories that, because of the way this movie was treated, I think I would like to see it. I would like to read it and kind of explore what his intention was.
It'd be something curious for sure.
Yeah.
I did like the way they did some of the science, the kind of the special effects throughout the film. I thought that was kind of interesting, especially as it comes to Nia and her powers. Like, there was a scene earlier on when she's terrified of walking across the grass, and it's almost like this semi-levitated run that she has over the grass, which was kind of really clever, the way they handled that.
Also reminiscent of the way the aliens skimmed across the ground at the end of A Dead Mountaineer.
Right, yeah, exactly. The way that she freezes the watermelon in front of her and then blows it up. Like I already brought up the cartoon cutouts. She teleports, which is kind of handled interestingly. She pushes that guy away when he comes up and touches her. There was just a lot of really interesting elements that she did that I thought were interesting, the way that they handled creating those moments.
What'd you think of the blob?
The blob was okay. So the biomass, the whole thing at the end, I found that to be it was an interesting element that they added. I just don't think it ever worked quite right for me. I actually loved the look of it. The fact that they had some people in it, like reaching out these arms clearly in like some sort of a sleeve sort of thing, made it look really creepy. And I thought it was
great.
Yeah, it was very effective. But I didn't fully understand it because, okay, so here's my recollection of the scene when we have Rakan, after he's been stabbed, he has this vision of himself with the father, whatever his name was, who Glan, it was Glan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who shows him where it is. And my recollection is Glan was like, all it needs is a brain. It needs to have a brain introduced to it so that it can become become what I want it to, or whatever it was. And so my impression, and maybe I just misunderstood, but I thought that Rakan was like throwing himself into it to give it the brain that it needed so that it could kind of move on to its next phase and kind of help save the world. And I guess I was confused as to why all of a sudden it just goes mad and starts like destroying everything and eating everybody. I just didn't understand any of that.
Yeah, I didn't either. And that's exactly the story I wanted.
Yeah.
I wanted him to sacrifice himself and become that. Or, alternately, there is a horizon out there where it actually grabs Turinchaks and becomes a sort of maniacal planet-destroying thing. Either way, the biomass to me was supposed to be the Genesis device, right? It was supposed to be
basically
the cleansing agent.
Yeah, right.
Right? And it never played out quite right. First, it just absorbs everyone in its path.
Yep.
It does break the connection, apparently once and for all, for Nia, making her that complete individual.
Yeah.
So she reaches her fullest form. But we don't actually get any sort of rewarding display of a fixed planet, right? We know it's out there, but we have only that last little bit where they show the blue sky, and that's their experimental area. But then this biomass goes crazy, and is the planet really fixed? I was never convinced that they actually solved the problem. That wasn't clear to me.
I guess I thought it was more clear. It was just weird the way that it worked because she holds it back, but then everybody kind of contributes. And it's almost like, okay, what are they doing? Are they molding the biomass? Because it seems like everybody's kind of reaching in and they push it in and form it into a ball, which I was like, okay, is that representative of the world and now it's healthy? Because all of a sudden it's just gone, and now because they show the ground and you see lots of little baby trees sprouting up.
That's true.
And so that's like, okay, so they healed the planet and now it's growing things again. The sky is blue. We're back to normal. But it was...
And Nia's home, where she belongs,
Right.
with her people.
Yeah.
And her people are somehow mended. They're fixed.
Yeah. I guess.
Right? I mean, I guess, because there were an awful lot of people who had, horrific deformities, right? And they're wearing all those funky masks. Yeah. And so I think that was just an uncertain display for me. I feel like there were a lot of elements that were going in there. And I guess you're right. In retrospect, I guess the planet was fixed. Or at least it was in a position to begin growth anew.
Yeah, I felt like it was the cleansing rain at the end of Lion King, right? Like they got rid of got rid of the blob. The blob helped heal the planet, and now the sky is clear and there's growth coming out of the ground again, and
right.
everything is hunky dory. I think it was just they suffered from low budget special effects. They had to do all this with what they had, and so to that end, it's just we're ending up having to put a lot of interpretation into what we're seeing. And it just makes it a little more challenging trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
I think it works. It's just rough.
I don't think you said what. Do you have a preference over which version of the movies you watched?
I mean, I definitely do agree that the newer version, the sound mix is cleaner. Like the new music mix and everything, it sounds nice. But honestly, like the old version also looks really crisp and clean. The effects maybe aren't quite as nice, but honestly, it still looks really good. I thought they did a great job with it. And I think if I were to watch it again, I would just stick with the longer one. It had more moments of just allowing the scenes to be. That I think that I know they shortened a lot of those scenes, but in doing so, I don't think it helped make it feel faster. I think that I'd probably just stick with the longer one.
Well, I only watched the shorter one, and I don't have the benefit of that. Both of the versions are available on YouTube. Again, thank you, uncertain copyright jurisdiction.
Right.
And they don't appear to be going anywhere. So if you're interested, we'll put links to both in the show notes.
Yeah.
Anybody else you want to talk about?
I will just say, I really liked Yelena Metyolkina.
Yes.
Who played Nia. I thought she had a great face to be an alien or a clone or either.
You know what? I felt like she was the inspiration for Alita Battle Angel character design. You know what I mean? Like her face was just so wide and like big, and in its neutral expression, there was so much expression. There was just so much to her not doing anything.
Right.
I loved it.
With those dark, like just the bags under her eyes, just kind of giving her that tired look with the white wig that seemed to be, white hair, I should say, but it seemed to be a wig, I guess, because you see her putting that same wig piece on an infant with her dad at one point.
Like the Lego hair.
Yeah. I'm like, what is that strange little thing? I don't know. But I loved the way that I loved the way she reacted. Like she felt like an alien, like the way that she would push at things to push away things, like with the two hands in front kind of crossed and stuff. Like she did some really cool things that just felt very unique. And I just really liked her as the lead of this film. I just thought she carried it really well. Yeah, me too. And I'll say I liked Vladimir Fyodorov, who played Turinchok. I thought he was a great villain. Yeah, he was great. I actually think everybody was in here. I didn't have any performance in here that I thought came up short, from Lebedev, who, I mean, it's just, it's hard to watch this movie and not find the comparisons to Star Trek, right? I mean, I just like the way the ship moves through, through space, and the father-son kind of parallel, to Kirk and David, and it's just there are a lot of parallels that are sort of unfolding in this movie. But in each of those sort of stereotype roles, I think everybody did great. And I didn't like Stepan Lebedev when we started, but by the end of the movie, I actually really had come to like him and appreciate kind of his relationship with her. I thought that diving scene was sort of interminable. Like I didn't understand all the mechanics that were going on there that were between the relationships, and I just found everyone
annoying piece. But it moved positively from there.
Yeah, I mean, it has its issues. I mean, it really does have them throughout, but largely I found it to be interesting. I will say the music, Alexei Rubinikov, I really enjoyed the music in the film. It had a great kind of 80s sci-fi vibe that worked exceptionally for me.
Looking at our notes here, I just want to highlight that we will not be talking about facts and or tidbits, sequels and or remakes, awards or numbers, because you have written in that really just perfect Andy Nelson brevity, no to every one of them.
That's right. No.
I would be punished if I had you walk through each one. There's nothing, nowhere, anyhow, moving on.
That's right. I love to have information about any of that stuff, but alas, I do not.
I'm still glad we watched this movie. It was not the greatest movie. It's not a 5-star and a heart for me, but I'm really glad we watched it, and I think we should take it to the mat.
I think we should.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've ever talked about on this very show. But if you swipe over in your show notes and tap the word Flickchart, it'll take you straight to this movie where you can add it to your list and see how it stands up against ours.
Okay, first up, we have To the Stars by Hard Ways or La Cage aux Folles.
La Cage aux Folles.
La Cage aux Folles. To the Stars by Hard Ways or Stripes.
I'd like you to go first.
I'll say Stripes.
Yes, you will. Thank you.
To the Stars by Hard Ways or Gone with the Wind.
I'm going to go To the Stars.
I got to go Gone with the Wind. It's a problematic film, but I just think that there's...
I'll give it to you, but the record is...
I know.
The record is recorded.
I know. To the Stars by Hard Ways are next Friday.
Oh, man.
I'm going to say To the Stars here.
Yeah, I would To the Stars.
To the Stars or The Blob. We didn't even talk about the octopus person.
I know. Oh, Andy. Okay, table that for a second.
I loved that octopus guy. Yeah. You're the Blob. I'm the Blob.
Yeah.
To the Stars by Hard Ways or The Andromeda Strain.
The Andromeda Strain. Talk about retro.
To the Stars by Hard Ways or Cries and Whispers.
Cries and Whispers.
I'll take Cries and Whispers. To the Stars by Hard Ways or Underworld Awakening.
Underworld Awakening.
Yeah, Underworld Awakening. That's To the Stars by Hard Ways or Friday After Next.
Friday After Next.
I'll take Friday After Next. Well, that lands it in spot 457. 457 on our chart out of 487. Pretty low. That's only a 6%.
6%. Andy.
I know.
How to do on your list? Did it crest 6%?
Well, Pete, it landed in spot 3969 on my chart. 3969 out of 4,541 movies, which is about a 13%. A little bit higher.
All right. 13%, a little higher. I actually was higher than that. I came out at 1,075 out of 1,483. That's 1.5 stars, or 28%. If I go over to letterboxd.com/thenextreel, 1.5 stars feels about right to me. So I don't know. I mean, it's not a 0.5 star, 1 star movie. No. I think there are some things interesting in it. I actually question if I could go to 2 stars.
I'm at 2 stars. I think there's enough interesting stuff in here to think about, to talk about, to enjoy. I think there are some really interesting elements in the film. It's just it's sloppily constructed, but I did find it to be enjoyable. I was never bored. It's just a little bit of a mess, but there are so many enjoyable pieces. So 2 stars, no heart for me, but 2 stars.
You know, I'm okay with that. Let's just do 2 stars straight across the board. I'm not going to watch it again. I didn't love it. I had a good time watching it, and I think there's enough in here that you can watch it without making fun of it if you want to.
Here.
That should have been on the poster. You could watch this without making fun of it if you want to, Pete.
I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well,
nice work. So this was the middle of our Soviet science fiction series. Where do we go from here?
We're going to be jumping forward a few years to a film from 1988 called City Zero, directed by Karen Shakhnazarov. which is another one that I've never heard of, but I'm also curious to look at this one, especially now that it's 1988 and it's getting right to the very end of everything going on in the Soviet regime.
Yeah, I think there's some stuff. I think there's some stuff to talk about with this movie. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm excited to do so.
Well, I'll tell you, I already have my Letterboxd review picked out for City Zero, so I'm ready to go
You're
on that
working
one.
ahead.
I'm ready to go on that one. But until then, when the movie ends,
our conversation begins. Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
as Letterboxd always doeth.
It really does. And that's, you can see something is different. Maybe we're going to be over here in Letterboxd for a little while. Maybe we're doing that. We'll see what happens. I actually, so mine was 1.5 stars. I ended up with an unstarred review on Letterboxd but I pick it because it seems to be tonally positive and it brings up yet another thing we did not talk about in our review.
Okay.
All
exciting.
Right. Would you like to go first? You go high
sure.
or low?
I went to 3.5 stars, so a little higher.
Right in the middle.
A little
Okay,
higher.
little
yeah.
higher.
Mine was by Ashton Kinley, a recent watch from about a year ago, who watched it as part of a Soviet sci-fi double feature at the Canadian Center for Architecture. There you go.
As you do.
Ashton says, this 2-hour and 40-minute epic is full of some of the oddest moments on film that I have ever seen. And I've seen cats. There's Glasha, the bulky household robot maid, who also plays tennis. There's Krull, the octopus-like creature who is deathly afraid of cats and loves bubblegum and gets unceremoniously tossed into his home planet's ocean in one of the funniest scenes of the film. And most importantly, there's Nia, the Sinead O'Connor-esque clone, who is literally so iconic that every single person she encounters is willing to put their life on the line for her. It's truly a remarkably bizarre film, but a blast to see with a crowd.
Yeah, I can get that. I think this might be, it's weird that we might come to this movie as the reason that movie theaters should stay in business.
Right.
Sorry, Tenet, you just didn't have what To the Stars by Hardways had. My review comes from Meme, who says, there's a lot going on that was pretty unnecessary, and I know I was watching with terrible translation and all, but it was somewhat enjoyable because the plot and conflicts were actually interesting and intense. I enjoyed all the characters, except the octopus. Like, what was even the purpose? But my favorite had to be Unexplained Spaceship Kitty. There's a cat on the ship. I love that. You kind of get to it, and we didn't talk about the octopus, but that review nailed it. One of the funniest scenes in the movie.
So weird.
Throwing the octopus overboard.
And what was he making? Like, its meal, just like he'd crack the egg and pour it in and then drop the shells in too.
Drop the shell in and stir it up.
Okay.
Good times. Thanks, Letterboxd. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchase is made through our links. Give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We covered a lot of great movies that were adapted from other material in Season 10.
Our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals is where listeners can purchase the source material behind all our adapted film discussions. It helps support the show at no extra cost when you buy through our links.
In our foreign language Best Picture nominees series, we looked at several adaptations, including Z, The Postman Il Postino, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Letters from Iwo Jima.
We hit the high seas with In the Heart of the Sea from Nathaniel Philbrick's nonfiction book for our Aquatic Killers series.
Definitely a weaker entry in that series.
I bet the book is better.
Oh, me too.
Member bonus episodes featured adaptations like Gone Girl, The Russia House, Ivanhoe, The Hot Rock, The Big Heat, and Naked Lunch.
Oliver Stone brought not just original stories, but also adaptations like Conan the Barbarian, Scarface, Year of the Dragon, 8 Million Ways to Die, Talk Radio, and Born on the 4th of July.
Mary Herron's disturbingly insightful American Psycho was adapted from the Bret Easton Ellis book.
You like Huey Lewis in the News?
Oh my God, it even has a watermark.
And of course, more Stephen King with The Mist, The Green Mile, and The Shawshank Redemption for our King a la Darabont series.
Find links to all of these books and more adapted films on our originals page. That's thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports our show.
Get the full list of books that we've talked about and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.